let's get into the latest news and rumors around the Denver Broncos. And OTAs, they started today not only for Denver, but for a lot of NFL teams around the league. But one thing that I love about OTAs in this time of the year, this is when, competition starts. This is when the real juices get flowing. So before I even get into this, who's the quarterback, man? Who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos? Is it Drew Lock type DL, or is it Teddy Bridgewater? I want you to type TB. Remember, they went out and traded for old Teddy Two Gloves or whatever the heck his nickname is. But I haven't really heard much about this until today, and I'm just excited because that just means we're getting another day closer to a little bit of football. Speaking of OTAs, there's been another quarterback that's been brought up a lot around the Denver Broncos, and that's actually been Aaron Rodgers. So he didn't attend Packers OTA today, which, if you're a Packers fan, you should definitely be a little bit worried about. For me, I'm like, well, this shouldn't really surprise anyone. He's obviously not happy. But everyone else out there being like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's only OTAs. Rodgers is usually at OTAs. So that, again, just goes to show that this man is just not a very happy camper. In terms of the best odds to go out and get Rodgers, the Packers still have the highest odds in terms of minus 170. Then you got the Broncos at plus 220, and then a pretty significant gap. And then you got the Las Vegas Raiders. If I'm the Broncos and I got to be able to figure out a way how I can get Rodgers, you got to figure everything out, because the last thing you want, and even heck, same for the Raiders, you can't let your division rival get this guy, because then you got to deal with Patrick Mahomes, and you got to deal with Aaron Rodgers, and you got to deal with the guy who won Rookie of the Year last year in Justin Herbert. And anytime you hear in terms of a guy of the caliber of Rodgers who just coming off the MVP award, this stuff doesn't happen. So, I'm excited to see all the competition between Bridgewater and Drew Lock. But always know this. If you have an opportunity to go get Rodgers, I think you got to go ahead and do it. So, let's look into that crystal ball here. Obviously, I just asked you about Lock and Bridgewater. Who do you think is going to be the starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos Week 1? If you think it's Drew Lock, type Drew Lock. If it's Teddy Bridgewater, type Bridgewater. If you think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, I want you to go down in the comments section and type AR for Rodgers. Is Courtland Sutton a top 30 wide receiver? We're breaking that down here on Broncos Breakdown. PFF rated him as the 28th best receiver entering the 2021 season, which some of you are like, wait a minute, I don't even know who this guy is. Well, it's because he missed 2020 with an ACL injury. Ever since he came out of SMU, this has been one of those players I'm like, he's got the talent. He needs to get a little bit better at his route running, but you can see the natural ability. It's definitely there. In terms of having a breakout year, you kind of saw it a little bit in 2019, but it's easily can be forgotten for the simple fact of when he got injured, then they go out, they draft Jerry Jeudy in the first round. They also went out and drafted KJ Hamler, and there's a lot of really talented pieces on the offensive side of the football. One of my favorite pass-catching tight ends, Noah Fant, as well. So you're talking about a lot of talent here, which Sutton does have at 6'4", 216 pounds. Again, only 25 years old. And in the one game that he played last year, 3 catches, 66 yards. But I don't want you guys to just remember the 2020 season. I want you to think about what he did in 2019. And I've come on this show before and I've said I'm not the biggest Drew Lock believer. I'm sorry, I'm not. But when you see this type of production from somebody who was only 24 years old, that should at least open your eyes a little bit. So he was targeted 124 times in 2019. He had 72 catches, 1,112 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I'm a believer. If you give him a above-average quarterback, if you put him on the field that's somebody with just a little bit more talent, maybe 28, honestly, could be a little bit low. But what do we do here at Chat Sports? We ask the difficult questions, and I want everyone right now to go down in those comments, and I want you to argue, and I want you to battle it out. Is Courtland Sutton a top 30 wide receiver? And maybe when you think about top 30, you're like, man, that's a lot of guys. Of course he is. There's a lot of really talented players here. So type 1 for yes, or I want you to go down in the comment section and type no, Courtland Sutton is not a top 30 wide receiver. I'm going to sit here and type yes. I've watched him at SMU. I've watched him in 2019. And sure, in that once game sample size this past year, you can see he has all the tools. I don't know if he's going to put up the numbers that maybe a top 30 wide receiver would put up because there's so many mouths to feed in Denver. But if you're telling me in just talent alone, he's still going to be that number one option over guys like Jerry Jeudy. I still think he's the number one option over somebody like Noah Fant, over all the running backs. Melvin Gordon, who's the guy they just drafted from North Carolina. Javonte Williams as well. Like, there's so many mouths to feed here on this offense, but you're still going to see Courtland Sutton is that number one option, and he is the number one receiver on that team and a top 30 receiver in the National Football League. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button if you're trying to stay up to date on everything going on around the Denver Broncos or your favorite NFL team. So what do you got to do? If you want to subscribe to Chat Sports, you got to go to youtube.com/chatsportstv. If you just want to click that big red subscribe button underneath, that way you don't miss anything, I'd appreciate that. But anytime that there's breaking news or anytime that you see some crazy stuff going on, I don't want you to miss it. So hit that big red button that says subscribe and turn on those notifications. Denver Broncos Breakdown coming at you here at Chat Sports. Bleacher Report released some of the best sleepers on each team. The sleeper that was picked for the Denver Broncos was A.J. Johnson, linebacker. I'll tell you what, I saw this name and I'm like, all right, I can understand this one a little bit because Von Miller obviously did not play in 2020 with an Achilles injury. That really forced somebody like Johnson to be able to step up. The Broncos have done a phenomenal job, I'll say the last 5-6 years, in terms of really being able to churn out really solid linebackers, or I'll say edge rushers, if you will. But for somebody that's 29, for him to be put on a sleepers list, that should intrigue a lot of people because usually, not that if they don't pan out by the time you're 29, you don't have a chance, but for you to really get on the map at this point of your career tells me that he's a hardworking guy and he's been doing the right things to stay on NFL rosters. But 72 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups, and 2 forced fumbles. And when we were going over the graphics before the show, producer Jeremy and I were like, man, look at this picture. This guy is intense, which is obviously something you want to see, especially when you're trying to fill big shoes like a guy like Von Miller. But the other thing I wanted to be able to look at here is not just take things from what Bleacher Report said. I also wanted to be able to show you guys some extra numbers here from PFF in terms of maybe why he was chosen in terms of a sleeper. So in terms of a grade overall, 65.4. Against the run, a 67.0 grade. If you're wondering what certain grades are in terms of PFF, a very, very good grade is like 80 and above. A good grade is like 70. So he's right around a good grade here. Pass rush, 65.7. Coverage, 61.6. Why Bleacher Report decided to pick Johnson in terms of being this sleeper player on the Denver Broncos, this is what they had to say, and this is kind of how they wrapped up their decision on why they chose him. It has taken time for Johnson to carve out a role. He's 29 years old, but he should be a defensive fixture for the foreseeable future, which I 100% agree on. So one of the reasons why we wanted to do this is because all we're saying is this. Don't sleep on this man, A.J. Johnson. And if you don't like the pick that Bleacher Report had, that's okay. There's a lot of other options you could potentially go with here. So what I want you to do is this. Name a sleeper on the Broncos. It can be on the offensive side of the football. It could be on the defensive side of the football. But when you think about a sleeper, it's not somebody that's a big-name player, right? This is a guy that a lot of people don't really know about, and he could be getting close to having not quite a breakout year, and I don't even want to say a household name, but somebody like, all right, yeah, I know who that guy is, right? So go down in the comments, name a sleeper on the Broncos.